Hey, this is Michael Bauman. I'm DP of Ed Gein, and you're listening to the Cinematography Podcast. We would just hide reflectors everywhere, and as they were walking through, it'd be like, hey, just make sure when you pan your light around, hit that for a beat, and that would illuminate their face. So it was really a lot of the actors with the flashlights doing a lot of it on their own, which kind of added a really interesting quality to it because we'd always have like the ambient from the exterior of the home was always seeping into the house, but it was never carrying into the space. There really wasn't any light that was leaking into the home, so their flashlights were doing a lot of it. And it was kind of a great way to start to reveal all the little parts and the little bits and bobs of how horrifying the Ed Gein world was.
This is Cinepod, the Cinematography Podcast, a program about the art, craft, and philosophy of the moving image brought to you by Hot Rod Cameras. Hey, I'm your host, Ben Rock. Today on our episode, I got to speak with cinematographer Michael Bauman, who is nominated for an Emmy for Netflix's Monster, the Ed Gein Story. You can also see his amazing work in the Oscar-nominated movie from last year, One Battle After Another, or the upcoming A24 film, Tony. In this episode, we dive into how Michael built a distinct visual language for each era, with lensing shifting from period to period. Color and texture gave the digital image a weathered film period look, lighting the Emmy-nominated Episode 6 sequence almost entirely with reflected and practical light. Rather than lighting the set conventionally, the crew bounced light and had actors sweep real flashlights themselves, revealing the horror gradually. Why the less is more philosophy shaped how the show handles its most gruesome material. Instead of extreme gore, props and details were shot so that it was hard for the audience to see clearly, with sound design doing a lot of the work. How a single unbroken shot in the hardware store reveal scene grew out of a scheduling crunch. Short winter daylights forced a one-take solution that ended up becoming one of the episode's most cinematic moments. After the interview, stick around for our short ends, our pet obsessions of the week. But first, find out what's going on in the world of entertainment in a little segment we like to call Close Focus. All right, so let's get into it with our close focus. Say, Ilya, nothing's going on in the entertainment industry at this moment, is there?
Yeah, maybe there's one thing we could talk about. Actually, there's a bunch of things we could talk about, but I think the one thing that it's on everyone's sort of in the California's mind, having to do with the Paramount Warner Brothers merger.
Never heard of it.
Yeah. So the California Attorney General has basically blocked the merger from going forward, and they've set a court date for March of 2027. So at the very least, this merger is not going to happen immediately, assuming it does happen. That being said, David Ellison, who is chief executive of Paramount, has said, well, if it's going to get blocked like this, then I'm going to take my ball and go home. I'm going to pull Paramount out of California.
Yeah, so little billionaire tantrum there. It's interesting, and it's more than one person has pointed out, it's the only major studio with a studio presence in Hollywood, to which, I'm sure 10 other studio complexes are going to say, up yours, buddy. But, but like Warner Brothers is in Burbank. Disney is in Burbank. Sony is in Culver City.
We should explain this, though, to the people who are listening who maybe are not in Los Angeles and don't understand the geography between Hollywood and Burbank. It is like they do more or less run up against each other. You've got Universal City in the middle, or Toluca Lake, yeah. But like this is like going directly to the suburb next door. This is, if there's no traffic, a 10-minute drive. If there is traffic, it could be like, 9 years.
It could be an hour and a half because it's LA, yes. But yeah.
Exactly
yeah.
Right.
But I mean, Paramount was like the first lot I ever went on when I first moved here. I was lucky enough to shadow Jonathan Frakes, of all people, directing an episode of Roswell, which was shot entirely on the Paramount lot, except for some location stuff at Vasquez Rocks and some stuff. But it was mostly shot on the Paramount lot. And it's a storied lot. It's historic. I mean, everything you've ever seen that ever came out of Paramount. So much of it was done there. It's a gorgeous lot. It's got a great back lot, got great offices, great studio facilities. You've seen a bajillion things that were shot here. And for Larry Ellison to be like, yeah, we'll just leave.
I guarantee you that one of the other majors would buy it immediately, assuming it was at any sort of reasonable price.
Netflix would buy it. Netflix would just go in and buy that immediately.
It's right down the street from Netflix's HQ. It's like Netflix would love to have that backlot. And it's interesting, property is particularly valuable simply because they didn't sell it when so many other studios sold off their backlots when the getting was good in I think it was the 1970s mostly. They were like, wow, we've totally got all this extra value for our real estate. We should sell it off. Paramount didn't do it. But I think it's a fairly empty threat. I don't believe that David Ellison really wants to dismantle Paramount.
Where could you put Paramount? Where does Paramount go? I mean,
Vegas.
I guess he could leave the country. He could go. Yeah, I mean, like, he's a multi-billionaire. He could go wherever he wanted with it. But you kind of go like, okay, let's even talk about cities with a burgeoning or strong film presence, like Atlanta.
There's thousands of employees at Paramount involved in the lot and the operations there, and the continuity of wanting to keep your team and your people doing what they do, not to mention they're a multinational corporation, but let's say they're going to pull everything out of California. So Hollywood, of course, gone. Let's say they're going to do that. The relocation costs to keep your people from that decision too has to be astronomical, because most people are like, well, okay, the job's moving. You're going to make me move for this too because of what was the reason? I think that they would potentially lose a bunch of people who don't want to go. And there's a bunch of fairly well compensated people who could be perfectly happy, possibly working over at Warner Brothers or one of the other places in town. I think it's pretty funny because I think that it's less likely that deal will ever go through if they leave. If they leave, there's no chance that deal goes through.
Yeah, well, I do think that kills it, but I just wonder about the emptiness of the threat. Like Elon Musk during the pandemic got tired of pandemic regulations and he pulled Tesla out of California or major operations and relocated to Texas. It's a much younger company, so there's that, but also like I guess I'm getting frustrated with people who pretend that they love movies and film culture, saying things like, I'm just going to break Hollywood. I'm going to take one of the main avenues of production and just yank it root and branch out of Hollywood and stick it in I don't know, Albuquerque, Chicago. I don't know where you put it, but no matter where you put it, it's like the people who, like you're saying, it's not just the buildings. You could build a studio complex anywhere. You could build a backlot anywhere, but it's the infrastructure, it's the people, it's the culture, and it's so ingrained in this town. I just feel like it's just wiping your butt with whatever, basically a century's worth of culture, tradition, history, all that. And like, yeah, you got the Paramount library, you got the Paramount name, but is it Paramount anymore once you do that to it?
We won't get to the bottom of this, and this is going to be a long-running thing that's going to go on for, we know at least through March of next year.
The merger but will this threat remain? Will
I think it will. I think it's going to continue because, frankly, you want to uproot and move Paramount. That is not an overnight decision. That is a massive undertaking, and just to make that threat, I think it's highly the timeline between, hey, we're gonna prevent this merger from going through. We have a court challenge to I'm making this threat was almost zero time. So to make that threat, I don't think that they've even run the numbers of what that move is going to cost. That move is going to cost a lot, and I think that once that move happens, too, the deal's probably dead. So there you go.
Yeah, and like, what's the upside of the move? So let's pretend they relocate Paramount to Albuquerque, like that is gonna cost the cost of making many God knows how many movies to do that, and with no. They're not going to make any of that money back. That's just like selling land and buying land and moving shit. And at the end of it, what have they done? And you're absolutely right. Once they play that card, the merger is ostensibly dead.
It's Saudi Arabian money, and so that's sort of like the big talk of this too, is because they're not financing it entirely out of pocket. They have the Saudi money that's coming in to do this. So there's an awful lot of moving parts, and I think that if they can't get it done quickly too, then the longer it goes on, the less likely it is to happen.
Yeah. All right. Well,
All right.
We'll all just sit here in suspense, having a daily cortisol spike over what's going to happen to our entire town and our industry. So,
You know what? I'm seeing more signs of life. So I think even if, let's say, the worst scenario was to happen, if Paramount did pull out and somehow the merger still went through, and the promise, which is it's a pretty empty promise, of them making 15 theatrical release movies a year, also fails to materialize. Thankfully, the industry is not just one company. Thankfully, there is a bunch of other stuff that's happening right now, and in a way, this is legacy media doing what it can do. It is not a particularly innovative space. I know that, Oracle wants to think of itself as a tech company and there's Oracle money flowing into all this, but this is legacy media. This is mature companies. The way that they expand is through acquisitions. And if these continue to get swallowed up, I feel like there are more entities that are going to rise up and challenge the status quo. I don't think that we are locked into this, to this, monopolistic single pole option of the future. And I think that there are more tech companies that are being founded right now that are looking to challenge it. I know it's a big dollar swing for them to do it. But, Netflix feels like it came out of nowhere, and it really didn't. I think there are going to be more challengers entering this space. Mark my words.
I think that's a perfect place to leave it, man. Let's go on with our interview with Michael Bauman.
Let's do it.
Let me start just by asking, because we didn't talk to you that long ago. It was right before the Oscars, so it was even, I think, this year, with One Battle After Another, which features just some jaw-dropping, amazing cinematography and one of the most remarkable car chases I've seen in any movie ever. How did your life change after all the hoopla around One Battle After Another?
That was just an incredible ride, just
Yeah.
from when all that fired up and everything, and just to see and meet so many people. Look, I mean, it's certainly because I had already, after One Battle, I finished. It took a while for Paul and Andy to finish editing and get the movie out and all that. So I was doing all sorts of different stuff. I did Monster and I did all this. So there's work in the pipeline, and I ended up. But when all that happened, it was just like, wow, some really interesting scripts and things, and got to, just function on some new projects. And one of them is this current project I'm doing, which is this Nancy Meyers movie that's
Oh, very
shooting here in
cool.
LA. And so we're
Shooting in LA.
shooting in LA. Yes. We're about halfway through the shoot. Been shooting
Mm-hmm.
for it's all it's a Warner Brothers project. So we're shooting a lot of Warner Brothers in the studio, a lot of it's really great. Nancy, well, I would say what Nancy's one of the things is she's really into, which has been fascinating for me, is a lot of historical cinema, the cinema of screwball comedies and things from the 30s and 40s. And so it just really allowed an opportunity for me just to like deep dive into just this styles of filmmaking that I knew but hadn't really like dug into at the level that she has. And this particular project was actually set up at Netflix first and then went down, and then strikes happened and everything, and then Warner Brothers ended up picking it up and turning it in, and greenlighting it, and we're off to the races. So it's been a lot of fun. But yeah.
Now, I mean, since your background was, being a gaffer and being in the lighting department, are you finding yourself like, now that you are a very established DP, are you finding that like people who you worked with as a gaffer are reaching out to you and being like, holy crap, come on out and shoot my film? Like, is there any relationship between the gaffer and the DP kind of jobs that you're being reached out for?
There is some of that. It's also like a lot of like producers and people that you've worked with on different projects who are like, "Hey, I hear you're shooting now. What, that kind of thing." And I mean, so much of this, like, this community is just all about relationships and things like that. And it's certainly there's people that I've worked with over the years who have ascended into new positions, whether they're in studios or other things, and just those relationships are always really good and strong. And so it's you get calls from interesting places. I'll put it that way, which is kind of fun.
That's cool. Yeah. I mean, What a movie to signal your arrival as a cinematographer. It's such a great piece of work. But let's talk a little bit about Monster Ed Gein. So you were making that. Were you making that before you even were nominated for the cinematographer for best cinematographer?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I had so that kind of came about because when I'd done Licorice Pizza, I was in New York, just out there for a bit. And a friend of mine, Jason McCormick, who's DP, who shoots a lot of he'd been working on a series called Feud, which is about Truman Capote. And he
Mm.
needed somebody to shoot a couple episodes. And so I he said, "Hey, look, you're out here. Why don't you do this? I know you, we know each other. We've known each other for a long time, back when he was the first AC and I was gaffing." And uh, and so I came on and did a few episodes of that, and I met Max Winkler, who we developed a really good relationship. And then Max went on, and we did some of American Horror Stories, and then he ended up getting Monster, and he said, "Hey, would you be interested in doing this?" And I was like, "Yeah." I mean, he's great to work with, incredibly collaborative. Um, I since I grew up in Wisconsin,
Oh
I
wow.
knew a lot about the Ed Gein story, because that was always something I had heard about when I was growing up there. And so I knew, like, what the aesthetic was of that part of the world and all that. And so it was really an interesting collaborative, you know, basis for us getting started on this thing. So I actually finished one battle, and then we ended up just going right into this. And so yeah, and this all happened. We shot the entire series, and um, I ended up doing right after that. I did this A24 movie called Tony with a director named Matt Johnson and
Mm.
about Anthony Bourdain, and we did that right after that. And so there's like it was all these things that were going on before any of the one battle hype kicked in, because that didn't come out until fall that year.
Wow. Well, that's great though, because like once the one battle hype starts happening, you have all this other stuff in the pipeline too.
Yeah,
I haven't seen Tony, but it looks really good. I've seen the trailers and stuff for it, and this is a pretty epic piece of work about Ed Gein. I was familiar. I'd seen the it was like a movie in like 2000 or 2001 with Steve Railsback as Ed Gein, and it was shot by a guy who's actually been on our show, Vanya Chernow. I think I hope I'm not butchering his name. I didn't go back and I mean I went back and rewatched the trailer just to kind of be like, do I remember much about it? I mean, it's been so long. But I feel like a lot has been said about Ed Gein over the years, and in a sense, this series is commenting on that, not as much as it's commenting on Ed Gein, but it's sort of like I was shocked in I think episode 2 when Alfred Hitchcock is a character, and now we're making Psycho, and then I was like I opened up IMDb and I'm like, I bet Toby Hooper's coming up, and it was kind of fun to see how some of that stuff sort of seeped into it, the other kind of cinematic influences that the Ed Gein story in its own grisly terrible way had on the culture, and kind of that how, like when you're looking at the script and you realize you're going to have to recreate moments from Texas Chainsaw and Psycho and Silence of the Lambs, like pretty noteworthy stuff. Um, like I mean, I assume it must be a pretty exciting proposition, but like, what are the first things that go through your head? How much of an influence were those films on you?
yeah, it's a great question. I mean, look, I remember you know, seeing Psycho for the first time, and I was like, "Well, this is crazy." And I was a little too young to really understand that, really all of it, until I rewatched it a few years later. But Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I mean, I remember watching that. And I was just like, it's such a raw film to begin with. The
Yeah.
style, the photographic, the photography of it, the look of it, all of it, and then just the violence is so extreme. It's so over
Yeah.
the top, and it's just like this is. I was just like, this is crazy, because I watched it at like a buddy's house. We were Steph's, we were hanging out, and it was like 11 o'clock at night, and you're like, what is this thing? And just the title of it, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. But I think what was interesting about the series, I think I really was when Max started talking to me about, was the fact that it wasn't just like what you just said, which wasn't just about like the Ed Gein story, which is its own. There's definitely a huge thing there, and but it's really the impact that this event had on American culture,
Yeah.
especially cinema, and which is really mind blowing, the scale and scope of what this guy, this single act of what he did, and in this remote town in the in the late 40s, early 50s in Wisconsin, and just how it ended up, you know, launching, a lot of what modern American horror is based off of. And and so what was interesting about the project is, Max was like, okay, well, we have multiple time periods. We have the 40s, because there's all this stuff about what influenced Ed, and then we have the whole Ed period and that whole kind of look of what all that is. And then we've also got all the Alfred Hitchcock stuff, and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and then, a nod to Silence of the Lambs at the end. And it's just really like, it was like, okay, well, we're basically shooting from the 40s to the 90s.
Yeah.
And how do we separate all these different periods, and, which are the areas that we're going to put a lot more emphasis on. And yeah, so it was just a whole broad framework of how, just a million different looks and things like that. And it was a lot of, visually, it was a lot of fun, so yeah.
Yeah, that was probably one of my biggest questions was how did you go about differentiating all of those things? Was it mostly a lens thing? Was it a lighting thing? How much of it happens in the grade? Like I noticed in some of the later episodes, like the Ted Bundy stuff, I was like, is that a Petzval lens? It looks like a Petzval lens. Not sure. Nice. Yeah. And I'm like, how do you end up with Petzval lens for Ted Bundy? But like, what was your creative process for kind of dissecting everything that you're doing and figuring out what would be shown with what representation, color palette wise? Like there's such a differentiation amongst every world that this series goes through.
No, totally. I mean, one of the things was is like, just in light, and like how we kind of stuck with lensing wise. We just kind of stuck with, what we tested a bunch of stuff. We tested film, and because we were talking about like, do we shoot like the Alfred Hitchcock sequence sections of the movie on film, and just try something different and things like that. But we ended up, for various reasons, sticking with digital. And then primarily our primary lens package was, just Kawa lenses, because Max really responded to how they flared and the
Mm.
softness of them. When we looked at our schedule, that really worked for us as far as for what we could do with the Hitchcock end of things, and the Ed Gein end of things. And so I mean, lensing wise, it was a mix of Kawas, and we had some P vintage, some of Dan Sasaki's, the P vintage stuff, and then we also had a few Petzls, which were really, so much of this is about, it's interesting you talk about the Bundy part, and there's definitely parts where we're using pencils, because it was just like, all right, how do you isolate this guy? And
that's where it most struck me. I recently did a project where we used Petzval lenses, so I'm kind of used to that look, and I think that we get used to the Robbie Ryan swirly bokeh look,
yeah,
and Petzvals don't do that unless you shoot a really specific way. Like it has to do with a lot of different factors, but there's something about kind of the center punched focus of those lenses.
yeah, yeah. So it was interesting just to kind of mess around with that a bit. But I mean, overall, it was like one of the things that, Manny, Tapia, who's gaffing it, and Ray Garcia, we really got lucky with our crew. And I think some of it was because we shot most of it in LA, which was
Oh, really?
because yeah. So
Never would have guessed.
I know we shot at Sunset Gower for the for the first half of it, and then we ended up going out to, outside of Chicago in Illinois area to
For
shoot.
the exteriors. Yeah, the exteriors. I'm like that. I mean, if you did that in LA, I'd be very impressed.
Yeah. But what was interesting is like the interior of Ed's house was all, obviously built on stage in LA.
Yeah.
And we had to make a commitment to that it was going to be snowing outside. We sure hoped there was going to be snow when we get there to shoot on location, because we had to, all the backdrops and everything, all the backings had to be, fabricated. And so we had to commit to like, okay, this is what we think it's going to look like, and this is the level of snow. And we got really lucky, because when we went on location, there was a snowstorm the weekend before. It was ungodly cold when we ended up, we're about an hour and a half outside of Illinois in a town called Moments. And but of course, halfway through the production, it warms up, all the snow's gone, and the special effects department's got to bring in like 80 tons of ice to create snow.
Oh man.
And but yeah, it was, the fact that we were able to shoot in LA for a good chunk of it. We had, just an incredible crew. And so, one of the things that Manny and Ray and I talked about was just, the differences in light from like Ed Gein's world into like the Hitchcock world and the use of sun and hard light versus soft light and all this kind of thing. And so it was, it's just trying to find these ways to kind of differentiate these different periods. Because a lot of times in the cut, you're cutting between we're here, now we're in the 40s, and it's just you've got to really try to kind of develop what that language is. Um, so it's just not just one big visual mush. So yeah, that was one of the interesting challenges of the project was just that it covers so many different periods and just how to differentiate all of that in the way that it was going to be put together. So we started with like looking at light and lenses, but then also Mike Hatzer over at Picture Shop was doing the grade for us, the color.
Mm.
And so we talked with Mike, did a lot of tests, brought in film tests that we had shot, and just kind of Max and I just kind of sat and we were just kind of like looking at what it was really just seeing kind of what Max is responding to and what kind of was interesting for him because he had built a pretty elaborate deck of images that were kind of the inspiration for it. And a lot of the stuff was from Capote, In Cold
Mm.
Blood, sense of like broad. Uh, one of the things about where Ed lived in Wisconsin was, and I went there. When we were shooting in Chicago. I drove up there.
Like to the actual, is the house still there?
No, no, it's a lot. It's in the middle of nowhere, just cornered, so like kind of overgrown. And then I went there and I went to, you go to his grave and all this kind of thing in the graveyard and all this, but which just doesn't exist because people have stolen the
Yeah, I
headstone.
was reading. I maybe went down more of a rabbit hole than I usually do.
Yeah, but I mean, the thing is the remoteness of that area is, and I thought like, okay, he lives in town, like, but it's like, it's actually where his house was still a good 15-minute drive from Plainville
Yeah.
and Plainfield. And so, one of the things was when Max was talking about the visuals was just the remoteness, the loneliness, the sense of isolation and of what this character's going through. Because here you have somebody who's out there with undiagnosed schizophrenia, basically, and in a time period where there just wasn't that, the access to the what you would need to manage that just wasn't available and
Hmm.
barely existed. And so, yeah, I mean, when he had this very elaborate deck that we went through and just kind of like started to pick together and figure out the color palette, and I was working really closely with Matthew Ferguson, who's the production designer, and as far as like textures and houses and way to create separation and how are we making the interior of the house dark, even though the exterior might be sunny or whatever. What is it? How do we, size of windows and all this kind of stuff? And it's really a lot of interesting conversations as they're kind of building this house and how to kind of create the sense of, especially there's a scene in episode 6 where the cops finally come into the two policemen come into uh, the house for the first time and they've got flashlights and we talked a lot about like how you're bringing them into this world and the sense of isolation and frame within a frame and all this.
I was going to ask you about that. I noticed so much, and episode 6 is the one you're nominated for the Emmy for, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and it's such a well constructed piece of cinema. That whole episode, it's so freaky because even though we've been living with this guy now for 5 episodes, kind of like we've been so into his world that it's the first time we're like,
Yeah,
uh,
this is where the
uh,
bill
uh,
comes due.
yeah, normal people walk into it. It kind of reminded me a little bit of Seven, like when they bust into John Doe's house, or actually Sloth, probably more like Sloth.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and what was interesting is when went to film school at AFI, and one of the days that I was out there, Conrad Hall came in, and so Connie Hall shows up and he brings two prints with him. He brings In Cold Blood and he brings Jennifer Aid, and he just turns them on. He shuts the sound off and just starts talking. And one of the things that when he was showing Jennifer Aid was that he was talking about how he had this huge space that they had to do, and they hadn't. And we talked about, oh yeah, we're gonna put condors outside and light everything up. And I was like, forget all that. Just let's start with flashlights, and I'm just gonna have a board and we'll walk around and as characters are walking through the space, we're gonna just reflect light back on them. And so this was something that kind of really resonated with me over the years. And so when we talked about the scene, I was like, well, so much about what the whole crux of the scene is these guys are walking through, and one guy, the more seasoned vet, kind of has an idea what he thinks is going on in here. The other guy is the uninitiated newbie
Yeah.
who's like just completely, who's really stumbling through the entire house, but not aware of what he's looking at.
Yeah.
And and it was about how to reveal these moments of when he's seeing things. And so with the flashlights, we did a lot. What was interesting in this project is we did a lot with reflected light, and we used a lot of the light bridge system. The Snap, they have a product called Snap Bridge, which is like an umbrella that
Mm.
integrates light bridge product with it.
Is that to create kind of the snowy reflective look?
Yeah, and it was like it wasn't so much about like, okay, let's have a key light through a soft thing, but like how do we just get like areas of reflectance, and so that we can just kind of and then use something harder as a reflector just to pick up little accents. And so for this scene, for example, we would just hide reflectors everywhere, and as they were walking through, it'd be like, hey, just make sure when you pan your light around, hit that for a beat, you know, and that would illuminate their face. And then, and then we leave. And so it was really a lot of the actors with the flashlights doing a lot of it on their own, which kind of added a really interesting quality to it because we'd always have like the ambient from the exterior of the home was always seeping into the house, but it was never carrying into the space. So there really wasn't any light that was leaking into the home. So their flashlights were doing a lot of it. And it was kind of a great way to start to reveal all the little parts and the little bits and bobs of how horrifying the Ed Gein world was.
Oof. Oh, and we never mentioned which camera system you guys settled on.
Oh yeah, so we ended up shooting Alexa 35,
Oh,
which
sweet.
yeah, which is I mean, I know cameras are like film stock, so I kind of view it like that, and Alexa 35 has really been, uh, you know, for me has been a very good match for kind of my sensibilities. So it worked out really well for us.
I mean, what's it like going from shooting VistaVision to shooting digital? I know that like you're not going to have a favorite. They both have their own utility, but what's it like making that move?
The interesting thing with on One Battle is that, and Paul and I have always been not afraid about pushing. Like it's something we started way back on Phantom Thread when we were kind of like trying to find the look of that movie. That was involving taking 5219 and pushing it to stop and rating it like 640, and then adding other elements to it, low con, things like this. And so the advantage of Vista, which is that we were generally always rating it at around, we were always pushing it. Sometimes, most of the time, one stop, sometimes two stops. But it was so you could always rate it at like 800 comfortably. And so you're really almost in the same, ASA as like what digital is at. And
Yeah,
so it wasn't like you needed like, oh, and I'm always not a fan also of, I don't like working. I mean, the camera, obviously digital cameras are incredibly sensitive, amazing. That is unbelievable. But I also don't like working necessarily at that, like, oh, hey, if we shoot it at 2.8, I need like 3 foot candles and at 800 ASA. And it's
yeah,
that to me, I like to be in an environment where you can light more by your eye rather than like, let me go check at the monitor to see, if the camera's registering something. So, um, even on this current job, a lot of times we'll just start the day with an N6 and the internal N6 in because we're shooting Alexa 35 right now.
mm,
And so at least you're working at levels that are a little bit more, you can walk in, you can make more judgment calls that way. And so for me, moving to the Alexa 35, it was just like to go from Vista, it was just like, okay, well, this is we're very similar as far as ASA. I mean, we have a more dynamic range with the Alexa 35, which we kind of tempered a bit in our LUT just because it was a little too much. But
yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's just an interesting another type of format which has its
Well,
own.
I mean, I wonder too because like digital has the peril of going too sterile or flat or whatever, and I feel like you got a really nice look out of like the whole show looks amazing and it looks very organic. And I was wondering if there were things you did filter wise, lighting wise, LUT wise to kind of soften that up and give it more of an organic y. I feel like it's almost pejorative to say a film like look because I feel like digital looks great. It's not that there's anything wrong with it, but you're going for a vintagey look. You're going for a period look, and so
Yeah,
feeling digital might betray that.
yeah. I mean, one of the things was you're totally right, and that's why the film discussion came up early in the process because Max was like, I really just don't want this has got to look weathered and period and
Yeah,
have like a film feel to it. So we did do film testing and just to see and we took some of that in with Mike Hatzer and just started looking at like, okay, these are the things, this is film, this is what we like. this is good, this is great, blah, blah, blah. And Mike had already, he had kind of built, we started with like a basic film lot that he had. And then, it was just putting the cocktail on top of it when we shot digital tests and just putting them next to each other and taking advantage of the versatility of what we could get of the digital, but still really trying to make it feel as much like film as possible, which is, I mean, so it's so the end image has, obviously it's got grain, we've added barrel distortion. There's a halation in there. There's a few things that there's this cocktail that kind of came out of it, and especially rolling off the highlights, I think it's a really critical thing, which is like a lot of times with digital, the highlights can get really peaky
Yeah.
and like and so we just tamper that kind of all. That coupled with the Kawas, which all had slightly lower resolution, helped also.
Did you do any filtration on camera, or is it all post?
I don't think we did much. I'm really not much of a filter person in
Mm.
general, so it's like, I think the Kawas, just how they kind of performed were really, that was good for us. And we maybe add a thing every now and then, but it was pretty rare.
And it might just be, the lighting for snow and lighting the way that you did. It kind of gave it a kind of a softish cast.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, totally. Because that's
the
one of the
period
things. Like
stuff.
it's all, yeah, exactly. Because it's all, so much of the area around his house is all. I mean, it's just like snow, so it's just white everywhere,
Yeah.
and so you've just got this like very wrappy, very reflective light that kind of goes around the entire house, which was fun to play with.
So episode 6, again, the one you're nominated for, and congratulations again for that. Is there's a lot of special effects. We're seeing a lot of special effects. I'll call them props for the unspoiled, but
Yeah,
it's pretty gruesome stuff. And like we're seeing Ed Gein's crimes, like you were saying, like we're seeing it. The check came due or whatever. Like where like the cops are in, like, and so we're seeing it the way that they see it when you're showing these gruesome things. And there's also the school of thought of like, just show it. But I was getting the Thing kind of vibes. Maybe it was the snow, from the way that you revealed it. I mean, there's that one big reveal in the barn or whatever that's like,
yeah.
I'm just curious, like, what was your ethos in terms of how much do we want to see of this? How much do we want to let people fill in? Because I'm sure the props looked amazing.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, killer team, killer team who did that stuff. And it was definitely like you'd look at the things and you'd hold them and you'd be like, okay, this is, this part of the body. And but how do we look at this? And even though I know what this is, you're looking at it, how do we photograph it, look at it, shape it in ways that it's just, is that what I'm looking at? I can't quite tell, kind of thing. And so, but you make a great point about the Thing, because that to me, that movie is, and it's funny. I talked to Dean Cundy about it because
Oh
he's
man.
got crazy stories about that thing. The sense of like, yeah, less is more, and we also had the benefit of some great sound design, which is ultimately another element to that. Max and I talked about like score and what are you going to do here, and he's a very 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 collaborative individual, which is just joy. And as far as like, when we started to talk about how we're going to see some of these, how do we reveal the horror? And certainly that's exactly it. Less is more. Arrange like all these fingernail clippings in a manner that you're like, what is that I'm looking at? And
Yeah.
so there's this part where the guy goes around and they get into the house and he's walking through the house, and his flashlight is hitting all these horrific stuff. But you don't the audience might know some of it just because they've seen some of it previously, but it's really like, you're just, let's put this way, and here's all the skin suits hanging on the line and all this kind of stuff, and it's just, and then when he comes into the one room where it was just something that Matthew, Ed's house was pretty well documented, obviously, when they arrested him.
I went and watched a documentary about it after I saw your whole series, and I was like, wow, it really, I mean, I'm sure that geographically, or the layout might be different, but it really captured the whole vibe of Ed Gein's house.
Yeah, Matthew was like, look, we have to honor as much as we can and be true to it. But he goes, here's where we can kind of fudge a little bit. And so, a lot of it was like building parts of his house that didn't necessarily get documented. And so, because the house got burned down, like they were, it's kind of like what was going to happen, what happened in the series, like they were going to sell it, and this guy was going, to and then they just burned down. The townsfolk were like, party's over. We had a lot of conversations about how the architecture of the home, and because there's a part at the when the guy walks through, and he sees these faces wrapped around like jars, and it was really like put that in front of a window, so it's kind of a little bit backlit. You don't really know what you're looking at, and then his flashlight reveals it, and it's kind of building all those different layers in as these guys are walking around, just figuring out, oh boy, we're screwed. You know.
Now, how much of the sequence build of that was in the script, and how much of it was you guys figuring it out on set and being like, oh, okay, if we have them come in this door, we'll have, first we see that, like it's a little bit like a video game, like we're bringing in the smaller things, and then you get to, the boss fight in the barn. Ugh.
Yeah. I mean, it was interesting. It was it was definitely scripted. Ian, who had written the script, done. He did the whole series, and he had stuff in there. But there was also a thing of like we went in there as they were building the set and constructing it, and started just to block it out with Artemis, and kind of come up with different sequences. We did this for several things. We create like a board, and just kind of look at like how are we telling the tension moment here.
Artemis the app.
Yeah.
Ooh, I want to hear how you use that.
Oh, it's just, I don't know. It's just popping up all the time. And it's just a great way to, for us to go through and just kind of document everything and come up with potential ways of working through the, what that sequence would be. I mean, I also used a lot of, there's a scanner called the X-Grid,
Mm.
which we had a scan of the house too. And so I could move around in 3D and just kind of look at like different angles and where we could put cameras and things like this, which is kind of fun. And so it really gave us we had a lot of prep.
Xgrid is the app, or is Xgrid something that like?
X-Grid's a physical scanner.
Oh,
Yeah, and so that's something that I've kind of really been messing with over the last year or so, of just like, through Polycam, which is an app on your phone, which is your phone's LiDAR and creates 3D space.
I use Polycam. I messed with it. Every time I scan like a location, it comes out looking really lumpy.
Yeah, it can. And what we were doing with our scans is loading them into a product called Jet Set, which we're able to move around and look at through a lens, the set in 3D.
Wait, so you do a Polycam scan and then you bring that into JetSet?
We took an X-Grid scan
Got it.
into JetSet. But I have used Polycam to just do a quick, like, oh, I'm in this environment, especially on scouting, because you can create really quick floor plans and details, and then go back and look at all of that, which is super helpful.
So we touched about this a little bit earlier, but it's like you cover like 40s, 50s, then 60s with Alfred Hitchcock, then 70s with Tobe Hooper, and then we do get into the 80s, because not only do we go into like the movie after effects of the Ed Gein story, but we go into sort of his impact on other serial killers. Ted Bundy, Richard Speck, and like what were the things that you were using kind of to differentiate our way through the specific decades? I mean, obviously you've got wardrobe and stuff like that, but when we get to the Tobe Hooper stuff, that's a Texas Chainsaw, more of a Texas Chainsaw aesthetic. I feel like it gets more contrasty, but I could be reading into that. Like what were the creative choices that you were making on those?
I mean, I just want to take a second shout out to Carolina Costa, who was the other
Oh
DP
yeah, yeah,
on
of
the
course.
project, and she did a lot of the Texas Chainsaw stuff with Ian, who was directing those episodes, the
Mm.
guy who wrote the series. When we were talking about like what is the Texas Chainsaw component supposed to look like, it was we did a sequence where we were really trying to duplicate shot for shot what they had done. We worked a lot with, okay, the lighting back then, what Daniel Pearl did is, it was very hard, it was very harsh. Really tried to duplicate exactly what they were doing, and then also with Mike, on the color with Hatzer, was just to add some contrast and grain, but then also just really, blow the highlights a little bit more, that kind of thing, just to kind of really mimic that 16 millimeter. I can't remember what stock it was. I ended up seeing Daniel Pearl, and he was telling me all sorts of great stuff, which I wish we would have known at the time, but it was great, you know, and just how wacky that insane shoot was. And and he was like, I don't know, 24 years old or something like that when they were doing,
And still shooting today.
and still shooting today, and still obviously had an insane career and all that kind of stuff. but yeah, it was really just like, okay, how are we gonna how to really, because that's such that imagery is so iconic, and so many people have come back to that film on for so many, the body language, all of it, the look of the face mask and all that. And it was
I
just really
know.
interesting to look at that, and then look at like what Ed Gein was doing, you know, back then, and how does those translate? Just a lot of you had to have a crew that had a good gallows humor, I'll tell you that, because this is a lot of dark stuff that you're in all day long, and then I mean, you just have to be able to have a laugh about the whole thing.
I mean, in my experience, the horror stuff is where people are the goofiest on set, and the comedic stuff is where everyone's the most serious.
I completely agree. It's like, when you've got all these body parts in this, and this is going to happen. Okay, cool. Yeah, you have to have people who have a sense of humor, because
Yeah.
otherwise it's super dark stuff. So yeah.
No, you couldn't like make it through that. There was not to make it about me, but one time I worked on one of those crime scene reenactment shows, and it was a real crime, but it was I'm just doing reenactments, and in my mind, if I make it a horror movie, I can make it not real, and I don't feel gross about what I'm doing. But the executive producer kept wanting to play us the real 911 call, and I eventually had to say, like, I don't want to hear it.
Nope.
Like I'll feel guilty about what we're doing if I feel like this is real, like.
No, I mean that's one of the things that we're lucky with on the with Ed's thing, is that there's the documentation. There is a lot, but it is very there's I mean, Charlie, that who plays Ed, he found some recordings of Ed's voice that he
Mhm.
worked off of and things like that. But what is pretty wild is that this isn't I keep thinking this is like ancient history, but my parents are still around, and they retired in Wisconsin, and in their retirement community there were people who were from Plainfield who actually had interacted with Ed Gein.
Yeah, he only died in like 1984, and that was one of the things you guys do at the end. Is he's like, I was like, wow, is it going to go out on him listening to "Owner of a Lonely Heart" by Yes?
I was like, that ending sequence is something interesting, because Max is like, think all that jazz. And we watched the
Oh
end of all that
wow,
jazz when Roy Schneider,
Fosse, yeah.
yeah, exactly, and Fosse and all. And this is where we're taking it. And I was like, I remember talking to Ian, right? I'm like, wow, how did this end up? And he was just like, well, I was thinking this and this and this. And Max was like, let's just really lean into it. And so, yeah, that was that was a crazy day on the set. That was a crazy day at the office, I'll tell you that.
Well, I mean, we only have a few more minutes, but let's talk more about episode 6, the one you're nominated for the Emmy. Like what were the big challenges that you had to overcome? Were there any specific things about that episode that stand out to you, or noteworthy things? Because again, it is like the big reveal episode.
At the end of the day, even though we have to make a schedule, and so a lot of times Max and I would just talk about like, what's the scene really about. And so there's a sequence in the movie where we were under the gun to make the day and make the schedule, and we're shooting when light levels, or we get dark early and all this kind of stuff, so you didn't have a lot of daylight. So there's a sequence where the two police officers go to the hardware store to try and find the guy's mother, and they walk in, and we only had a little bit of time to shoot this sequence. And we had originally talked about, okay, we'll get coverage here, we'll get coverage here, coverage here, but it just wasn't, we weren't going to have that luxury. So it was really like, let's talk about how we can block this and turn it into a oneer, but still reveal the fact that we have to show the cash register's gone, we have to show blood on the wall, we have to separate the two guys at one point, and one guy. And so it was those kind of things of like, okay, here's a challenge of like, how are we going to get this,
Mm.
have the emotional impact it needs to have, and navigate this, and just do it as one fluid shot. And it ended up working out really well, and it helped that we had two actors who were really, they knew the material, they knew what they're doing, they were really like down with the plan. And so they come walking in, and it's all very soft front light that's coming in from the streets, because the plate glass windows behind them, and they walk in, and they kind of walk through the thing, and one guy goes off into the back, and he's walking around there, and then we focus up, we come in right close on the other guys. He's walking down behind the counter, and his cash register's missing, and then you see him look over, and there's blood on the wall. But the key part is that to get to where the blood hit, we couldn't we couldn't carry his face at the same time, because we had to pan off him. So we put a key box that had a reflective glass, and so you could see him in reflection as
Oh,
he's staring at the blood. And that became a way to pull him in, and then he went back to his face as he realizes, oh boy. And then it swings around, and then our other guy comes back in, who's like, I'm sure she's around here someplace. And the other guy's like, okay, she's clearly dead, but this guy doesn't want to believe it.
Yeah.
And so it's an interesting thing of like trying to, maintain lighting consistency and get the shot done in the amount of time we had, because that's always under the gun. It was a great time of the year to be there from the standpoint of like, it's winter, all that, but the days were super short, so you really had to plan accordingly.
Well, I mean, like, but when you're doing a wonder like that, and you know better than I do, but like, it sometimes will make it more complicated, won't it? Because you got to get it. Because I know the exact shot you're talking about, and it's like a beautiful cinematic moment of the series, and it doesn't feel like it doesn't play like a choice you made to save time. It plays like, oh, this is the big reveal. It's like, at what point does it become a purely creative choice for you versus being a
And matter of necessity.
yeah, because I mean, like, if you cut it into two shots, it might have taken you less time, because once you commit to a wonder, it's like,
You commit.
one thing doesn't, that guy misses that key box by 6 inches due to no fault of his own. Yeah, you got to start over.
No, I think it was, Max and I talked about it early, and it was like, this would be really interesting. And I mean, obviously, we're trying to figure out how to make a day, but it was really like the set itself, the way the set was laid out, it really made, it was like, oh, I see a path here, how we could do this, and we have him do this and come over here
Yeah,
and do this. And it was really like, it worked out really well. And it helped also that we'd worked a lot with these actors before, and we knew they could deliver.
yeah,
And so
yeah,
it wasn't like, oh, this, I don't know if they're gonna know the lines, or they'll be, if, they're comfortable doing this, but those two were in full fighting form. And we got lucky with that, to have that level of actors who can just, no problem. And I don't think we even did a lot of takes. I think maybe we did like 4 takes or something.
oh wow,
Yeah. And it was just, you rehearse it. We had a really good dolly grip who knew how to, that's the other thing, is like, Max is really good at creating an environment where a lot of the technical positions are involved in the creative process.
hmm,
And so it's like, you have a dolly grip who is just really like, okay, I can da da da. And if we did it this way, if he takes a step over here, then I can get this, which means you'll get that background. And it's that, and having an operator and stuff, and just people who really bring things to the party to just elevate the shot. And you can do it in a timely fashion and just execute at a level that would be much harder to do if you were trying to one man band it, so to speak. You know.
yeah, yeah. Before we go, we just want to encourage people to go on Netflix and check out Monster Ed Gein. Do you think he'll be returning for the next season of Monster, which I believe is Lizzie Borden?
Yeah, well, we did it. Max and I
You
did it. We
you already
shot,
shot
yeah,
it.
did Monster, and I went off to Tony, and then came back and did season 4 of Monster. So we did all that, which we shot in LA, but then also in Rome for a chunk of it, because they dip into like the periods of the 15 and 1600s.
Oh
And
wow,
visually, it was a lot of fun. A lot of fun. Definitely a departure from a lot of what the Monster series is. So I'm
that's
excited to
cool.
see what the reactions are.
Will you come back and talk to us about that when that
Yeah,
series drops?
sure.
That'd be so cool. Yeah, I'm excited to see it. That's pretty amazing. So, people should check that out. But do you have a website or any place where people can interact with you online, Instagram, anything?
I have Instagram, which is at Bauman Lights, Bauman
Cool.
Lights. Probably need to be more active on it than I am, but yeah, that's out there.
Well, cool. Well, thank you so much for coming back on the show. Can't wait to see what you do next.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so that was Michael Bauman. Michael, thank you so much for being on the show. Always great to have you chat about your process, and really exciting stuff.
And congratulations on the Emmy nomination for Ed Gein, episode 6. Everyone check it out.
All right, Ben, it is our short end time of the show. It's time we talk about our pet obsessions. What are you obsessed about this week?
There was a movie that came out. It kind of came and went a few months ago, and I know it came out this year, and I remember seeing trailers and being like, "Ooh, that looks cool," and it's got Liam Neeson in it. But it's called Cold Storage, and it was written by David Koepp from a novel by David Koepp. I didn't even know he'd written a novel, but David Koepp, who wrote everything, Jurassic Park, look him up. David Koepp's one of the most prolific screenwriters in Hollywood. It's a wonderful kind of alien goo, the blob kind of story that balances. I wouldn't call it a horror comedy, but it kind of balances an irreverent tone with some funky horror elements, and it's got really a great cast. I would totally have loved to have seen it in the theater. It was directed by a guy named Johnny Campbell and shot by Tony Slater-Ling, who I don't believe we've had on the show.
It doesn't sound familiar to me.
I saw it pop up on Canopy, so if you have a library card in Canopy, you can watch it for free. And it's just, firstly, it's visually, it's awesome. It looks great. It's got a great kinetic, interesting, kind of fun vibe, very colorful and interesting. And Liam Neeson is great in it. The cast is really great in it. And it's the kind of thing I wish had stuck around at theaters a little more. It came out this year, and I feel like this year, we had 2 mega hit horror movies. And there have been a lot of other excellent horror movies that came out, including, I know I've talked a lot about Hokum, for instance. There's a lot of good, there've been a lot of really good horror movies this year. We all talk about Backrooms and Obsession, which are both great. But I feel like Cold Storage, if Backrooms and Obsession got you hungry for more 2026 horror, check out Cold Storage. It's really fun. It's a fun horror movie, like in a Sam Raimi-ish kind of way. I mean, it's got its own vibe. It doesn't feel like a Sam Raimi clone, but it's got that kind of crazy vibe.
Nice. Yeah. Sam Raimi vibe is a good vibe to have.
Yeah. No, it's definitely cool. So, Ilya, what is your pet obsession this week?
Well, I'm a big fan of DJI's little robot camera called the Osmo Pockets. I've owned a couple of different versions of it. I'm also a big fan of this company called Muse, which basically makes a knockoff. I shouldn't say a knockoff. It's their own device, but really they use technology. They're fueled by DJI. They have a partnership. There is a new competitor in the space, and it's Airy. And Airy is, yes, I know. So Airy made a big deal a while back about a partnership with a cell phone company called Honor, a Chinese cell phone company. And they have officially, as of today, as of like 8 hours ago, launched their robot phone. And so it's Honor and Airy robot phone. There's a story about it on newsshooter.com. We'll put a link to it in the show notes if you want to check it out. But basically, it's got Airy color science and a little gimbal, and it flips out of the back of your phone. So if you can imagine like an Osmo Pocket 3, like,
yeah, I'm looking at it right now.
Peeling out of the back of your phone, you can then essentially have that sort of like gimbal functionality and your phone screen to shoot content or stuff. So on this page on News Shooter, they've got a little teaser, they've got a short film, and they've got the official sort of like global launch event, which is 1 hour and 44 minutes. So if you want to go deep into this, you can get really, really deep. At the end of the day, I still feel looks pretty phone-like. It doesn't completely shatter the illusion of what you've got as a phone. It does also look, though, very similar to sort of like Osmo Pocket, Muse, extra Muse type of things. But here's the thing, at least initially, won't be available in the US. So if you're listening to the sound of my voice and you're in the US, you're going to have to import this from somewhere else, and I would confirm that all of the different wireless signals work for you, because different countries have different systems. And it's going to be not cheap. It's going to be about $1,500, I think, for the base model, and I think there's a higher end model. It's about really? $2,000.
I mean, honestly,
US,
that's not that much more expensive than an iPhone.
It's not, but there's some people out there who look, you can, for $400 and something, you can get the Muse Extra or get the Osmo Pockets. And it's like, then you have a standalone device, which is fully made for a thing versus a hybrid device, which is certainly more convenient to carry around, but is not actually really made to just do that one thing, because it's also a phone.
This does give me like weird memory vibes of when Red came out with their own phone.
Very much. Yeah.
I knew one guy who had that. I'm sure you knew more people who had it.
There's one in a desk drawer at the office. Yeah.
I got to say that, like, having a standalone, like you sold me an Osmo Pocket, I think the 2, and I don't use it as much as I as I thought I would, but when I've used it, I think the image quality is pretty amazing, and I know the newer ones, the quality has gone up, and it's a great little device. Like this is operating under the old saw of the best camera to have is the one that's on you all the time. And, that honestly is why phone cameras have become such a staple, because I could also lug around a DSLR with me all day long, but I'm going to have my phone. And if it has a halfway decent camera, if it looks at least as good as a Kodak disposable camera would have looked, 20 years ago, then I'm for 80% of what I would ever take pictures of, that's good enough. So I guess the question is, if I was going to buy this camera phone, how is it as a camera? How is it as a phone? And how does the camera compare with a professional camera that I might use? What size is the sensor?
Well, they claim it's a 200 megapixel sensor, and it's in a very small size. It's 1/1.28 inch CMOS, so it's not that small. It's fairly good size, but at the same time, it all kind of depends, but I watched the videos, and the videos look good. I didn't think that they all looked, like a cinema camera, but definitely the Arri color science. I think Arri is the big winner in this deal, actually, because Arri gets to they get to diversify their product offerings through another company, suffer no blowback if this doesn't work, because they're just lending their color science and their optimization, their noise canceling technology. And frankly, it gives this company Honor a leg up potentially in the international market. And maybe they're really going after filmmakers to look, how many times have you been out with your phone somewhere and just been like, hey, I wish that I had something better than my phone, but I'm just using my phone because this is what I've got. That's exactly what this is doing. This is trying to give you a better option that you've got with you all the time. And in that regard, I think for the person out there who's looking for that, it's going to be a win. I think that
no.
People,
it's definitely interesting looking at it. I'm like, does that gimbal fold away, or is it just sticking out all the time?
Yeah, if you look further down in that article, there is a picture where it shows the whole thing folding into itself. So it doesn't look like there is another camera that is visible, facing that out. Maybe there is. I can't really tell based on the this. So it seems like you would have to pull it out every time you go to use it, and for some people that also might be obnoxious. I don't know. So maybe there's another camera hidden in there, and I can't tell. I didn't see that in the article.
Yeah, no, I'm looking at that picture now, and it does fold away. That's good, because that's the other thing about the Osmo is it's an odd shape. You can't really you could put it in your pocket in its case, but it's a little unwieldy, and you want something that you can pull out. I mean, I feel like this is going to be great for filming your kid's soccer game, and getting higher quality, on the fly. It's probably aimed at vloggers and stuff too.
I think the utility that I'm seeing now from it, though, which I think is probably most practical for people, is it looks like you can use it while it's folded up. So you slide the cover, and so you could still use it while it's folded. Also, you're now going to have an extremely high quality rear-facing camera or front-facing camera, or I guess whichever it is. If someone wants to take a selfie, you now have a much higher quality camera doing that.
That's all true. And people who are doing TikTok and stuff like that probably can get a lot of great use out of it. It's an interesting announcement.
They got Claudia Miranda ASC to shoot a launch film. It's a really small little gimbal phone hybrid. I've never seen anything like it, and that'll be interesting to see what happens. I assume it's going to come to the US. I assume it's going to come worldwide, and it'll remain to be seen if the market decides that they want to have a separate device or they want to do all in one. I don't know.
Very interesting. Very interesting.
Indeed. All right, Ben, that just about does it for this episode. Where can people find you if they want to get in touch?
Find me at benrock.com. A few people have reached out to me and given me their unvarnished opinion about my new overhaul of my website and how I'm presenting stuff. So, please keep it coming. It's very helpful. How about yourself, Ilya? Where can people find you?
You can find me at Hot Rod Cameras, hotrodcameras.com, sponsor of the show. If you need any sort of gear for any sort of thing, good chance we can help you. We got offices in Burbank, California, and Portland, Oregon. And if you're in the state of Oregon listening to me, yes, all of the money you spend with us would qualify for your tax incentive rebates in the state of Oregon.
Nice.
Yeah. All right, Ben, who made this show possible? How did we get here?
I mean, we would be nowhere. We'd be like dead skeletons on a desert island somewhere without our producer / editor, Alana Cody, setting up all these great interviews and staying on us to get all the stuff done. And now also conducting so many of the interviews herself, which I think is great too. So pretty soon you and I will both be obsolete. Is what I'm saying.
No doubt.
We got to thank Alana, and we got to thank Kays Alatrachi, who composed all the music that you hear on the show. Check out Kays' new website, Kays Labs, where Kays fixes synthesizers. True story. Or go to Music by Kays, hear some of Kays' music.
Awesome. All right. Ben, I think that is a great place to leave it. Do you want to take us out?
Thanks for tuning in. This has been Cinepod, the cinematography podcast presented by Hot Rod Cameras. Find your next camera, lens, or accessory at hotrodcameras.com. Watch and subscribe to our show on YouTube or listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Follow and interact with us on Instagram, Threads, Facebook, Blue Sky, and LinkedIn, but not X. Don't do that. Thanks for tuning in.